Welcome to Compass, Finding Spirituality in the Everyday. My name is Ryan Dunn. In this episode, I sat down with Episcopal Bishop Andy Doyle, author, church leader, and, as it turns out, an avid collector of vinyl records. Bishop Doyle takes us behind the scenes of his personal spiritual practices, from the soulful soundtrack that is currently shaping his days to the sacred spaces that he carves out for retreat and reflection. Bishop Doyle's latest book is Unabashed Faith, Resisting Spiritual Forces in the Modern World, and I was curious about how he would recommend spiritual contemplation and retreat in an age when we're always on and always connected, or at least when I feel a pressure to be always on and always connected. So, how about you join us as we dive into the embodied experience of faith and ask big questions about the role of church and spiritual community in a so-called post-religious society. From the ritual of dropping a needle on a record to finding sacredness in ordinary places, Bishop Doyle invites us to imagine a church that's less about institutional boundaries and more about belonging, connection, and pilgrimage. Andy Doyle lives in Houston, Texas. He is the 9th bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Texas, and he summarizes his autobiography in just 6 words: met Jesus on pilgrimage, still walking. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the sacramental possibilities hidden in plain sight with Bishop Andy Doyle. Bishop Andrew Doyle, author, leader in the church, collector of vinyl, I think I read. Is that still the case?
Right, that's true. It is.
All right, awesome. Then let's start off this way. Is there something that you've gotten recently that's in heavy rotation that is speaking to your soul or describing the shape of your soul these days?
It's really interesting. I collect mostly. The goal is to collect mostly classic rock and blues artists they were listening to. So I have a real specific genre. But the one that I have to be honest, the one I'm playing right now a lot is Nation of Two by Vance Joy. And just it's gotten, it's real soulful, the whole album is. It's got a couple of songs that have done really well, but I find that the kind of there's a longingness in there that has connected with me, and so I looked up to kind of think about what would that look like if I were honest about it, and that's where that's what I'm listening to. I have different things I like to listen to, but then I also have this real small collection of stuff I like to write with, which is also very much within that kind of genre. Okay. It's just easy to kind of go through.
What is an example of one of your go-to writing records?
There is a the soundtrack. The soundtrack for the movie, you're gonna have to help me here. It had Bill Murray in it, and they were undersea cinematographers. Team Zissou was the name.
That is a deep dive. Yes,
I know, really deep, nicely played.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, it'll come to me in a minute. But yeah, that's been. The music on that soundtrack introduced me to a bunch of foreign music I've never listened to, and it just stayed with me, and so I've added some to it. But that basic soundtrack was just amazing, and it's mostly a guy singing on a guitar.
Oh, gotcha.
With a guitar, and that's it. I mean, it's not a lot of band music. It's really
kind of the simplistic conductive to contemplation style of music.
Right.
We're going to have to do a quick turn here. Otherwise, we're going to go down a rabbit hole. We're going to explore would you get a record day and, what's your
yeah.
cartridge like and all that stuff. So
Right.
let's switch to the theological, shall we? Although
You got it.
I'll tell you what, I feel like there is a bit of a carryover here in that you talk a lot about embodied practice. And I think one of the things that led me back into engaging with something like vinyl records has been the physicality of it in the sense that it's not just making music something that I consume while I'm doing something else, but in a sense there's like a ritual to it, and dropping the needle and looking at the cover and folding out that gatefold and everything. So let's talk about that embodied religious experience a little bit. And I want to start with this. Our society is probably termed a post-religious society. So with that in mind, for those who are existing kind of outside of the space of institutionalized religion, like how might you describe the importance of faith or the importance of religious experience to somebody like that?
Well, I think part one, and I'm very interested in that conversation about kind of the post-religious society. But to narrow down on this question of embodiment, we as human beings exist within a body, and one of the things that we've had a hard time with as humans is seeing all bodies as important to who a person is, and typically we've kind of turned the body into an asset. So we speak about relational economies. We talk about labor force, right? And so we have economized the body. And at the same time, we've kind of divorced the brain from the body. But there's a whole cycle of interest within science and research that's saying, wait a minute, the brain doesn't operate alone at all. And in fact, it doesn't even operate as a whole thing. It operates in relationship to itself. And so within the body, kind of, to just say that we're this very complex creature, and that complexity is bumping into the world all the time, and that as it bumps into the world, it's trying to kind of make sense of itself and the world around it. And so if we think about religion in a much broader sense as for instance, like Emil Durkheim would have referred to religion in other ways other than the form that it takes in a church. We're able to see, I think, we begin to see that religion itself is a bodily experience, and that we then can see that actually we're not in a post-religious time period. We may be in a post-Christendom where organized Christian religion doesn't hold as much of the embodied religion as other things, but people are on a spiritual quest. And if we ask ourselves, how are they doing this? Well, they're walking the Camino, they're going out into the wilderness and camping again. They are seeking spiritual experiences on mountaintops with groups of people. Like, our bodies actually are needing something here, and that we are getting it from, I actually think we get it from we don't get it from sports, but we get it from being a part or the fandom of sports. We get it from the fandom of RC cars. We get it from the fandom of vinyl records. We get it from the the things that we actually are gleaning from the world as we've left kind of Christianity or Islam or Judaism for this other thing. It doesn't mean that we're not spiritual seekers. We actually are doing it all the time. I think our body's really hungry for connection, belonging, and I think part of what the church doesn't do well is explaining that we're actually doing something here that's very similar to that on a regular basis. I think the church has to stop hustling for it, and it actually needs to begin to live in it in a different way. But yeah, I would just say, doesn't matter who you are and where if you're listening to this today, it doesn't matter what your journey is at this moment. Actually, if you're listening, this is part of that seeking, and I think that's where the divine begins to do amazing things.
Do you feel like the church has participated in the neglect of the body?
Yeah, sure. If you think about we can just talk about ourselves, but the whole confessional movement from the Middle Ages as a response to kind of the scholasticism all in your brain, right? And we see these things pop up. So in America, we saw 2 great awakenings, right? Where people have this spiritual experience, and then the church has to wrestle. Are you part of us? Not part? So I do think that we have participated in this. I think that part of what's happened is that we got in our heads too much. We've been in our heads too much, and that's what's really getting in the way. And certainly Jonathan Haidt and Ian McGilchrist talk about this. We spend a lot of time in the thinking part of the mind, and so we've been nurturing this thinking part. But there really is another whole piece to us and our bodies that's important. And so I think that's where the church fell down. It's like the church kept doing what it was doing, and we sold everybody on what it was doing. But now what the hunger is, the church has to figure out how to talk about what it does and then do what people are looking for in a different way. So it's not to reject, not to completely move into all feeling, right? There's a balance, I think, especially in our traditions. There's a balance of mindfulness, as a Buddhist might say, but being able to talk, think, but also be aware of where our bodies are. And I think you see this particularly in the conversations Richard Rohr and others have been having around sacred space and finding that. How do you find sacred space in your house, right? These are things we've forgotten to teach people. In the Middle Ages, you would come on feast day and get your candles lit and take them home to your home sacred space where you would put them, and you would light them during the time of thunderstorms to keep your house safe from lightning. So this is what Candlemas was. But so Charles Taylor talks a little bit about it philosophically as white magic of a time. The church was involved. I would say the church was involved in helping your home have sacred spaces with holy water, candles, all these kind of things. And the problem is when you just have that and don't have other things, I think you're missing something like community. And yet at the same time, probably one of the most important things anybody, including myself, must do is find sacred space in their life on a regular basis for retreat from all of the connectedness and everything else. And I think tending to the body's own desire for rest and sabbatical, Sabbath time, right? This quieting down. I think we have to reclaim some of that. And certainly this is in line with other people who are thinking out there.
Well, what kind of sacred space have you claimed in your life?
So, there are a couple of different places. There's a retreat center that I love to go to. I'm part of a monastic community as a fellow that supports them but also retreats with them. And then in my home, there's a sacred space, a place to sit, a place that is a place where I pray, and a place where I can be quiet. And that, I think finding a thing, it's really important to our bodies, it turns out, to claim a space and then be in this space as a regular part of life. And that routine actually helps us rest better and pray better or be quiet better. So in all the traditions, they would tell you, you know, and sometimes it's around the dining room table, kitchen table with your family, where you engage in quiet prayer. Like, so it can be all kinds of things. Again, the church has thought it had to be Sunday morning for an hour. The church has got it. This is the gift. This is the gift of what you call the post-religious moment. The gift is to remind ourselves, no, wait, the divine is everywhere. Sacredness is everywhere. God is speaking to us all the time through all kinds and manner of things. It's not just like God created one time, and it's not that clockmaker. God, this is a God who's infused or saturated the world. Right, and so all of us are speaking this language. We just don't know quite what to do with it when it comes to institutional religion. But I think we're beginning to sort it out. We've got to listen too. We also have a great gift. You know, groups like that, whether it doesn't matter which tradition you look at, Abrahamic or Pacific, Asian, Eastern, all of them will speak of this need for our bodies to do this work. So I think that's, and we have wisdom about how to do it. So we ought to be sharing it, and not as, hey, I'll share it so you can come to my church. We ought to share it because people are hungry for it.
Yeah.
And we know how to do it. If they come, fine. If they don't, fine. Let us bless them on a journey. How do we be how are we a pilgrim hospital?
Yeah.
Right? The old hospitalers were not hospitals like we think today. They were respites, places to stop on your journey. How's the church become that for people?
I
think that's a big question.
I've heard a term that the church can be maybe in a modern analogy, the airport. You don't come to the church as the destination; it's the stepping off point for moving into that spiritual experience. We've talked a lot about our embodied spiritual side of things. In the dualistic sense, there's a mind component of who we are as well, which creates the greater whole. In Unabashed, you talked about some of the ways that, I don't know if it's fair to say that we've disengaged the mind or retreated into the mind, but I was particularly drawn to this phrase that you used about the Babylonian captivity of the mind. Can you talk with us a little bit about what that means?
Well, for those of you who don't know, it refers to a time when people were conquered and taken away to Babylon from their native land and from their primary worship space. And that, so that's what it refers to. And many theologians over the years have used Babylonian captivity to talk about this kind of separation from the who we are, from our context, from what God hopes for us might be a language of saying it. So, for instance, Martin Luther used the Babylonian captivity to talk about how at a set table that is God's, how God provides wine and bread for people to actually eat, and that you shouldn't withhold that from the people, right? And so that's the kind of to help with some sense of what I'm talking about there. And what I would say is that we have the mind has been taken over as the primary and only engaging part of our body, and it's being used, quite literally used, through social media and this kind of constant connectivity. And we've spent some time, I think we spent some time in trying to sort out how that works. How do we provide, just like the people, the Jews who were taken away, right? That they had to figure out how to worship in that space of captivity. And so we've tried some of that, but the truth is that the prophet Isaiah, who speaks to them, says, no, you know, come home too. So there's also this other piece that I think's that I think is really important is the being homeness in our own bodies, and realizing that we're not just a mind separate from, but holistically. So I sense that we've got to reconnect our mind with our body in a way that we haven't done in a while. And so it's not just about quieting our body. I mean our mind. It's not just about quieting our mind. We actually have to be still. And so much of what we're looking for, I think, what I look for, what I value, and I think people seem to be hungry for, is actually finding that connectivity. And the truth is that connectivity is related, even though you're on Zoom and I can't be in the room with you. The space that we inhabit is important. And our body, we need to claim the wholeness of that. But we also need to realize that right now, economics is based on getting our minds engaged and the body to follow. And sometimes we probably ought to be suspicious of how that data is mined, as an economic force.
Tell me about that.
By others, right? So we really are. Zuboff talks about this economy that's been created that we just all participate in, and we give to generously of our time without any payment back. And that the truth is that if only a few people in the world are gaining from all of our participation in all of that. And so what does that mean? And how do we reclaim that? And how do we reclaim being together? We used to say, when I first started ministry 30 years ago, that our parents didn't know how to argue, so the divorce rate went up. They didn't know how to argue, reconcile, and so they would move on. So we had generations of people, latchkey kids, single-parent homes, double-parent homes, all that kind of stuff happening, which still goes on today. But today, I think what we're inheriting is a world that's mediated through screens. And so, and which I do. I think it's part of the work now. But we also need to learn how to disconnect from them. And it's just as important as figuring out how to mediate and become partners in life, whether it's a group of people. So we have this massive force in our society, I think, like we could look at politics, division, all that. If we just sat down at the table and began to actually get to know each other, things would change. I believe it. I really believe it. And so as long as we can kind of be parceled out and used as percentage numbers to gain more commitment from others, I think our minds are being abused in a way that our whole bodies are going to suffer. And so the only way to reclaim that's going to be in togetherness.
So you recognize that our commitment to the screens has, in a sense, drawn us away from one another. And yet you also admit that you're still a participant in the digital realm, so to speak. Do you have some practices to recommend about disengaging then, finding that kind of spiritual retreat from it?
Yeah, I think every time we have our phone with us, that means that we are now able to be contacted by our bosses. We also are able to participate with others in social media. Now, social media is feeding, as I've said, an economy. So to not participate is actually to set this down. So when I go home, a practice I talk a little bit about this in the book, we just set this down. I'm not going to carry it with me. Oftentimes when my wife and I go out to dinner with people, I don't take it. She can take hers, or we can put this in the purse or whatever, but I'm not going to be attached to this while I'm in relationship with people. How do we, I was once with a person, she's very wise, this wonderful woman who I respect dearly, said, how about we just be curious about that fact instead of finding out what it is exactly. right? Like, so
it's an incredible amount of patience, you know.
Oh
like,
my God! I will tell you all, it will take you a month to walk in your house. If you really, it's 30 days of practice. So if you want 30 days of practice, you walk into the house, plug it in somewhere in another room that you're not going to be with the rest of your family, and leave it there. And do not use it until you can check it before you go to bed. But like, that's the first thing, is like, how do we take Sabbath from it? And I'm on social media all the time, so you know, I don't want to. What does it mean to sit at and watch a movie together on television, but I'm on the phone? I'm not interacting with the movie or the people in the room. I'm interacting like this.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the first piece. And so, do you take this into your sacred space in your home? No. Can you leave it in the car when you go to church? If you go to church, yes. Can you? If you're going to a studio to practice centering prayer, or to a chapel, can you leave it behind? How do you? I think this is a really big piece. It's not to say it's bad in and of itself. It's just to say, if the thing we're looking for actually can't be fulfilled bodily when we're only seeing everybody through a flat surface, this is a mediated surface. And so that's a piece, is how do you, so the practice of being still in your own environment, the practice of sitting with others, the practice of sitting in a park by yourself with nothing, just being with the other people in the park. They might be doing other things, but that is something that's happening. People will walk by and you can smell, you can see they're reading books and be curious. I mean, like, you begin to take in a world that, for me, the divine is speaking through directly, in a way. But every time we add a layer, we are separating ourselves more. So if you think about the Matrix, some of the Chalmers' work on consciousness, we begin to think about how these screens mediate us. Baudrillard's philosophy of, you know, this is a representation of us, but it's not really us in the room together. And so this is good, but it is mediated by something. Now, you take a still pic, right? And we capture this, we put it on the podcast. Podcast gets shared through social media with the big thing, shows the two of us talking, whatever. Each step away has become a repeated image that loses what we could have had in person, right? So that's how you get the Matrix movie, right? They're playing with Baudrillard's philosophy, right? The technology moved so much away that you might prefer staying in the world that is fake versus staying in the real world that is dominated by a war. Right. So for those of you who haven't seen the Matrix movies.
Spoiler. I think we're okay to spoil at this point. It's been a while.
At this point, yeah. That's on you all. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, this is why I think, this is why I think actually used clothing and eBay and things like that, where you can get your hands on things that have been used, right? You go on eBay and you buy a pair of traveling pants, right? You may not have ever seen that movie, right? But the traveling pants, right? Like, you get these things that are worn and used and have become beloved. And this is, again, just a way in which we're seeking for real connection. I don't want a new jacket. I want a jacket that was found in a garage sale that an 80-year-old wore for 40 years and has little paint on it and some scar. I mean, my gosh, what a privilege to wear that person's jacket and to know there's stories in there. And that's what I think we're seeking, is this with each other. I mean, you and I are engaging it right now. This is it. And it would be just 1,000 times better, except that we don't live in the same city. So we do the best we can, right? But I have a whole world here, and you have a whole world here that just is longing to be touched and smelled and all of our senses enliven when we're outside. And
you talk about sacrament being a form of resistance. Is this part of what you mean? It's a resistance too?
It is. So I feel like anytime we move towards each other, and I think I'm just speak generally given our audience, right? I mean, I think anytime we move towards people and are willing to sacrifice to be there, to be a part of the world, and maybe sacrifice some of our comforts or change some of our comforts so that the world may exist in a healthy way. Anytime we do any of that work, we are resisting. And the world is, and we are vessels of the conversation that I think the divine wants to have with us. So I know I'm speaking from my own faith perspective here, but I believe that's what's happening. And for me, sacramental life, the life of bread and wine, of water of baptism, that language has a lot of meaning for me, but it works the same way. It's the way, we would say it's closer, like it's more articulated for the sacramental church, the place where we imbibe and consume and see the water. Tertullian's really ancient divine speaker said that the water of baptism should be like water we live in and breathe and swim in like little fishes. And so it's just kind of an amazing way of thinking of sacrament in that way. And I would argue that humans ultimately, left to our own devices, will seek that in very real ways. The phone, all of this is just a substitute for real embodied human relationship. It takes us away from the original. Sometimes, like I've said, it's the best we can do. But we need to remember that our lives really are sacramental breathing places. And what the churches do at their best is to say, yes, there it is. You've gotten it. It's not about you becoming a member of this thing. No, you're swimming in the waters of the divine.
Nice.
Like, this is what's going on for you, and you see it too now. So we're gonna like swim in this water together, and I've done it, and now you're gonna do it. And what we know is that because people have seen that for us, that swimming can't be taken away forever and ever. That swimming in the water is true. And so I'm just curious about that conversation and that sacramental life. And I think when we get together for a pub crawl and we've got like the bread and the brew or the walk, we've got people, friends of ours who are walking the Icknield Way in England or the paths in England or walking and hiking in park together. When you are doing that, those are sacramental moments that the divine speaks through. Now, I think for me, each step away is not as good as it is with more people. But that's because when we're with more people, our guard has an opportunity to come down. And so sometimes I think you have to start with the divine by yourself. Then maybe you got like one or two, right?
Okay.
Kind of that Vance Joy thing, nation of two, right? Like you can begin to do that, and your guard comes down with these partners in our lives, these parents or substitute parents or, substitute brothers and sisters. I mean, that's all the church is like recognizing we're just fumbling towards God together in these spaces at our best. And anyway, I just think life is full of that. And I'm so grateful for that.
Mm.
I'm grateful for the church I'm a part of, but not because it's the church. I'm grateful because, you and I are visiting today. I mean, this kind of amazing.
Yeah. What other introduction would we have had it not been
right?
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like where you're going that because the church can feel daunting for people, especially thinking about the institutional side of church. And so the idea that church maybe is something that we, in broadening the idea of church as being sort of the community of people who are on this spiritual journey together, it's something that we snowball our way easily into just by broadening a sense of connection. Am I on the right path here?
Exactly.
Okay.
I have a friend who says, "Why are you so down on the institution?" He said, movements require organization, and that's true. Mm-hmm. That's true. There's no question about it. When you start getting more and more people and you want to do things together, it requires organization. But the organization should always serve the very basic piece of that life together. And when it stops serving that, then the organization needs to reform itself a little bit. And unfortunately, organizations don't like to do that. But they don't like change. And so they struggle. They struggle. But at the core, and this is, I mentioned this in this book, that finding the place that you need for a time or a season may not be the place that you walk in the door the first time. You may want a real quiet service. So I think people ought to really look for, these kind of things. And if the church doesn't feel like coming together, then by all means go. And if it becomes hurtful, go. I mean, there's, you're free. We're free. And sometimes I don't think we support each other in that freedom enough because we regress into wanting to support the organization. But we should always remember the organization, like we talked about at the very beginning, is like this pilgrim hut where we can sit down for a while together and put some plasters on our aching toes. And I was really formed by my own journey in pilgrimage. As a child, when I went with my dad early on to travel about 20 to 30 miles a day on foot from the town we lived in to the town of San Juan de los Lagos in Mexico, and so those are powerful images. And I think when you sit down with our friends at a table and break bread together, it's not the same as it might be in the church. But isn't that what we're also doing? I mean, I think for me, it moves into that space. When we break bread, something happens when we eat together. And eating's messy, by the way.
It is. I think
get it all over you.
I think it's the vulnerability of it.
It is. It's so right. And I know that not everybody is. I'm an extrovert, and I know that not everybody is, really does this. Some people need a lot more alone time to be able to do the other. But even monastics recognize that you have to be with others. The only ones who don't are solitaries who live off by themselves. It's a very particular and small group, right, of divines who are able to do that particular spiritual work. So all of those are just organizational models for what we're talking about in general for, the people that we're talking with today. They're sitting there and they're listening to us. It's great to have you on the podcast and wherever you are in your journey, right? But we're just going along together. The
spiritual practices provide a sense of going along. And of course, pilgrimage is a wonderful example of that and is a spiritual practice. In Unabashed, you lift up a spiritual practice with every chapter. Was there one that maybe you discovered in the process of putting this book together?
The one that I will tell you, and it's the one we've already talked about, that I found that I had a rule about my phone. I had a rule of life about my phone that I had done successfully for a long time, and I had gotten away. And so the book, what the book describes is something I had done for years. But we all might remember, except unless you're really young, this is a new technology, so it's taken in my lifetime, right? So considering that I had a beeper when my first child was born in the 90s, right? So it's been a slow move, but with that move and its expansion, I find I've been on the phone more, right? I can't let go of it more. Like all of that, I need to know what's happening more. My wife calls it doom scrolling. One of her spiritual practices is to post every day a rest from rest, weary traveler from your doom scrolling meme, right? And she puts a cool picture up every day. But like, that's a whole so I had to re-engage. It's like, oh man, I can't talk. I need to be doing this. It was so good when I did it, and it's fantastic. And it can be lonely when other people around you don't do it, but that's okay.
Yeah,
I think it's okay.
Yeah. Be the first to start the snowball. Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay. Just start over.
Yeah.
Start over. I just think, come on, we got to give each other a break. We are not going to be perfect in this life, and the spiritual discipline are just like everything else. Every hobby we have, everything that we commit ourselves to are these longings being expressed in our life, and so prayer life and the pilgrimage life of the pilgrim are the same thing. And if you think about a hobby that you have, do you have hobbies?
I mean, I'm searching for those vinyl records as well. And
right. So like it takes time. You got to go like to the shop. You got to maybe I like it better when there's a vinyl collectors gathering every quarter here in Houston. I love going there, and there are people I see and talk to, and right, like. We have to work on those things, and sometimes I buy a record and I make a mistake because it's already in my collection, right? Or like, okay, so what do you do with that? Well, you do things, and spiritual life's just like that. And I think we have to give the people who, unfortunately, I think we have to give each other a break in our churches so that we could be reminded, and some of this is just to remind ourselves and everybody else who comes, like, oh my gosh, it's hard. Life is really hard, and it doesn't matter what economic station you're at, truthfully. We all have real struggles, and we can help each other in those struggles. And I actually kind of think across the fullness of our embodied life together, actually we kind of need each other, regardless of what the class is. The problem is that we silo up so easily that we actually aren't able to contribute to each other's lives the very things that we search for.
Well, Bishop, thank you so much for taking this time to share with us in so many different perspectives. The book is coming out early part of June. People can probably find you at various Episcopal churches around the Texas area. Where is a spot for them to look you up online for more information?
They can go to the church publishing website, but it's on all the major book-selling platforms online. You can certainly walk into a bookstore and see if they'll order one for you. If it's not there, it'll be available for them to do so. And I would encourage that. Certainly I'm a book purchaser. And a bibliophile, but I would encourage you to buy from your small store, see if they can order it for you, and if it costs a little bit more, remember you're contributing to local economies, and that's really important as we go through this. But yeah, it should be everywhere for you. I just got the first hard copy.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, really nice. Looks like this. Comes with a hardback and nice paper. It's a great book. Of course, I'm interested in.
Well, look, also, oftentimes we're our own worst critics, right?
We
so
are.
if you can say, I'm really pleased.
I think it turned out pretty good. I'm like, wow, that's not our space has meaning. That's on page 13, the sacred chosen space, not just the objects in it, right? Like, that's wow, okay, maybe I'll sit with Andy, you have some good ideas. Maybe I should learn from you. I have to say it's a real vulnerable place to offer it up, because I'm showing some of my own spiritual life, which one-on-one people ask me about, but it is vulnerable to say, here's how I do this work for myself. Sanity.
Yeah, but as a preacher, you probably recognize that oftentimes the most profound thoughts come out of the places where you're, in a sense, preaching to yourself.
Exactly. I always say it's good when somebody tells me I've done a good sermon, I said, thank you so much. It's good to not embarrass the family that you're with. And normally if I really am honest about where my heart is on that day, normally there's one or two other people in the room who can journey with me in it. And it's a wonderful thing to hear some of that back. So,
yeah.
I appreciate you, Ryan. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I really am excited about the work, and excited about our greater work together, which that we're doing here in Texas with others in the Methodist world, and but I think your podcast is a real gift to people.
Oh, thank you. That's a wrap for this episode of Compass, Finding Spirituality in the Everyday. I want to extend a special thank you to Bishop Andy Doyle for such a thoughtful and wide-ranging conversation, and of course to all of you for joining us on this journey. If you'd like to dig just a little bit deeper into today's discussion, or to check out more episodes of Compass, visit our website at umc.org/compass. There you're going to find episode notes, resources mentioned in our conversation, and plenty of other episodes to inspire your own spiritual journey. We'd also like to thank the amazing team at United Methodist Communications for making this podcast possible. They're the folks behind the scenes bringing Compass to life each week. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review Compass on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps others discover the show and to join this growing community. Thanks again for listening. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, we're grateful to be walking alongside you. Until next time, keep exploring. Peace.